and probably accelerated. So my name is Martin Reynolds. I'm Field CTO at Harness for EMEA, and
John Crespo, Solutions Engineer for EMEA as well.
Okay, we're going to jump right in because now we've lost a little bit of time. So before we kind of jump into the meat of it, we just wanted to talk about kind of like our point of view of where things are today in kind of software delivery. So, you know, roughly 30 million developers worldwide building, writing code, and which is actually costing around $3 trillion a year invested in building software. That's an incredible amount of money. But unfortunately, we know that more than 40% of the time of developers is spent not doing that, not building new features, writing new code, which actually generally leads to kind of developer dissatisfaction. And you know, beyond that, security is an issue. Now, this stat is really interesting, this kind of 60% prod vulnerabilities. That doesn't mean sites have been hacked, just means people have pushed software to production and they know it has software vulnerabilities in it, which is a lot. And then something we're not going to talk about too much today, but there's, you know, from Amazon, Google, Azure, they say there's about 28% of wasted cloud spend. So let's talk about what the world looks like now for a lot of people. So if we go through, you know, you start off your development lifecycle, you've kind of got the coding piece, the requirements, mixed set of tools, and that takes some time, costs some money. You go from there and you've kind of got your build and your test. So, you know, again, multiple tools, security testing, unit testing, system testing. Then beyond that, you've actually got the release process, so you're going to actually deploy all that stuff, you know, into multiple environments, promote it, make sure it's all good, update your start, and then once it's deployed, you need to make sure that it's still working, all the testing was good, and then you go on to the verify stage. Across all of that, it's more and more increasingly so. We're regulated in our software environments. We have to make sure we're compliant and we've done all the right testing, that we have all the right guardrails in place. And then, you know, finally, to kind of understand where we are with all that, you need metrics so you can understand where we're going. So that's kind of like where we are. All of that adds up to time, cost, people, and, you know, actually developer dissatisfaction. So what we're going to do today is, yesterday we spoke to Booking.com on the main stage, and what they did is they talked about improving developer experience so they can have happy developers. They came up with some core principles about how they did that. Foundational elements around, you know, having a customer focus, so treating developer experience like a product, and then they kind of moved into that and saying how they were going to have a shared workflow, you know, to be consistent, right? To be able to do this at scale and well, they needed some consistency in the way the engineers were working. So kind of going on from there, what we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to John in a second, and we're going to talk about how, you know, we're doing this with, you know, unified toolchain, how we have freedom with guardrails, how we embed security and compliance, and how we gather metrics. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to, you know, I spent 30 years building software before I joined Harness. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to be the engineer, and John's going to show me how he's going to make my life better. So I'm going to hand over to John right now, and you know, going to make some assumptions that I'm an engineer. I've got a service that I already work on, and you know, how are you going to make my life better?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked, Martin, because imagine I'm going to put my engineering hat on. I have my other engineering here. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you guys is I wake up in the morning, Monday morning, 7 a.m., and the first thing I do as an engineer is to open my internal developer portal where I can see all the services I'm working on. It's a one-stop shop to see all of the tasks I have on my Jira backlog, all the pull requests that, you know, I've created that they haven't been followed upon, as well as the particular service I've been working on for the last, let's call it 2 to 3 months, right? One-stop shop for that single service where I can see all the source, I can see all the documentation, but also I can also see all the executions, you know, either successful executions or maybe failed executions for that particular services. I can see the API dependencies for that service. I can see, you know, things like what is this service depending on, is it an API or another service, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good way for me to understand who owns this service, who do I need to reach out to in case something goes wrong. Everything is one single place.
So this is quite good. I've got all the information at my fingertips. By the way, we're not nervous about doing a live demo. It's fine. So I've got all the information at my fingertips. But you know what? My boss has just asked me that I need to spin up a new service.
OK. All right.
So how are you going to help me do that?
OK, I'm glad you asked. So with the internal developer portal, you have the ability to actually use the power of the harness pipelines to create workflows. So our pipelines are not limited only to CI/CD, security test orchestration, but you can use these pipelines to orchestrate whatever you want. And one of the things we see our customers doing this is creating different workflows to achieve different things. How much time or how long does it usually take for a big organization to get a Wi-Fi password or to spin up an EC2 instance? I have to create Jira tickets. I need to follow up on Slack. I need to call my boss and follow up. Right now, I can do this in a self-service manner just by executing by the click of a button. And same. So if Martin, your boss is telling you, now I need you to work on this particular application or service, guess what? Now you can do that in a self-service manner. I just can say Devworld, for example, and then the internal developer portal is going to ask me a few questions that are relevant to this particular application. So what cloud provider am I using? Who is the owner of this particular service? Good tagging policies, right, for cloud cost. And also, what kind of database are you using for this particular application? Well, I go ahead and click on review, make sure everything is up and running. Once I click on create, so what Harness is going to do is to go ahead and execute a pipeline that I'm going to be showing you next. And pretty much that pipeline, what it's doing is to create a code repo, in this case, in our own code repository. It's going to create a Harness project out of the box for you by applying our Terraform files as well. And ultimately, the end result, what's going to be, is an end-to-end pipeline all the way from building an artifact, pushing to an artifact registry, provisions from infrastructure, and at the end, I have the right deployment strategies that will allow me to actually verify that deployment all out of the box.
So that's quite interesting, because one of those pillars from yesterday was freedom with guardrails. And I can see here I have some freedom. I could choose the platform. I could choose the database. I could choose the language from a constrained set. But still, I think one of the things that came out yesterday was it's good to be opinionated sometimes. But I still had some freedom for how I was going to build my service, but it was done in a way that gave me a straight path to production, right? That's what this is going to give me?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting one, because this is just a scaffolding, right, of what my application pipeline can look like. But obviously, if we go to a more complex kind of execution, as an engineer, look, what stands on the way becomes the way. Just literally give me my tool chain and get out of my way because I just want to write code. That's pretty much what we see across the board. So, but as platform engineers, so now we're talking to an engineer, but then there's a platform engineer on the background making sure that this pipeline runs effectively, securely, and reliably, right? And the engineer doesn't need to care about that. So let's say I have created this golden pipeline as a platform engineer, and I make sure that I include all the right guardrails so the engineers do the right thing and make it very hard for them to do the wrong thing. Let's say I'm a cheeky engineer and I say, you know what, I don't want anyone to approve my deployment. I just want to go to production, as well as I just want to, I don't want to have all the security scans. So if I try to do something like I just want to delete this pipeline stage and just go straight to production, so what's going to happen is before I commit this to the branch, so Harness is going to go ahead and stop me and clearly says, you can't do this because of these particular reasons. Engineers don't mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if this resonates with you. We don't mind the guardrails as long as we know why. Just if you're stopping me and you're disrupting my job, just tell me why and what do I have to do to actually go forward, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and kind of, it's one of those things where it overlaps a little bit with the security and compliance stuff, right? Security testing takes time when you do a build and, as part of a deployment. So actually, I might want to take that out. But stopping me, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. I think on this point, I'm going to talk from my own experience. Like I used to build core banking systems for some of the most some of the biggest banks in Latin America, in Venezuela, Panama, Dominican Republic. And what really annoyed me as an engineer back then was that it took me around 20 minutes to get into my zone to start writing code. If someone constantly is poking you and can you fix the security vulnerability? Or can you make the QA person, always, I have a list of things that I found in my application that you need to go and fix. And I still have a backlog of things that I have to do. And it takes me 20 minutes to get into my zone. At some point, I used to put like a sign on the back of my seat saying, please do not disturb because it takes me 20 minutes. So please go away, right? So this is a real pain because now DevOps, like Daniel was saying in his presentation yesterday, it's about collaboration, right? It's about closing that gap in between operations and DevOps. And we need to understand the why, right? That's a very good one. So that means DevOps, as a platform engineer, I need to collaborate with security and QA. And I need to sit down with them and understand from a security perspective what they're expecting me to include in my pipeline. And most likely they're going to say, OK, John, you need to run some code quality assurance in your pipeline. You need to make sure that before you push that artifact, we do some dependency tests and dependency scanning. And after you put the artifact, if you're creating a Docker image, I need to make sure that everyone is scanning the Docker image, right? And again, if I'm a chicken developer, I'm trying to delete this, Harness is going to go ahead and stop me from doing so.
Yeah.
On that point, very quickly, before you ask me the next question, this is all good, but what happens when something goes wrong, right? I'm not a security expert, so we're all here engineers, right? How many of you are security experts in here? Maybe raise your hands. OK, 1 out of how many, right? So if the job is writing the code, you need to tell me where the problem is and how to solve it. And that's exactly why we have another way to actually give you feedback and say, hey, these are the different results from across the board, right? I have Snyk, I have Wiz, I have SonarQube, I have all these different results from these first scans. And instead of me as a developer context switch and go to Snyk and see the results and normalize them and duplicate them, actually I can see in a single pane of glass what happened and what criticality I have introduced with my new deployment. And not only that, I can see the auto remediation in here as well. I can say, hey, this probably happened because this is a known vulnerability. And the only thing you have to do is to go ahead and change this. You can review it. And even if you go a step further, and let's say you select something like SameGrep, for example, because the problem is on the code, well, guess what? Harness has gone away and created a pull request for you. You can go ahead, view it, review it, the commit, and go ahead and just push it to the particular branch, and that's it. I haven't lost my zone at all.
So what you're really telling me is you're going to shift the information left, but try and avoid shifting me all the work.
That's exactly right. It's not shifting the more workload onto developers or engineers' plate. It's about giving me the right information so I can go and fix it, because that's what we like to do, fix problems, right?
OK, so let me just summarize what we've done so far. So I've looked at my existing service. I've started my new service. Minutes to get to my new code, where I can write my new first feature in my service. I have a path to production for that service. You're making sure I can do all the right things. And you're making it hard for me to kind of go outside the process. But for good reason, right? We're making sure that we're doing the right security checks and the right compliance and governance and auditing is all there. So, OK, but what happens when I get to production? How do I make sure that I don't want to babysit this, right? So how does that work?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because honestly, that's one of the reasons why I joined Harness as well. So ever since Harness was created, we started with a continuous deployment. That's one of our modules. We're a modular platform. But one of the things that really captured my attention was the continuous verification capability that we have. And the reason being is because, as you can see here in my laptop, I have a Jenkins kind of, I'm very opinionated with that. I used to build Jenkins or build scripts and then use Jenkins as an orchestrator for the jobs. And then I had to sit down and babysit my deployments. But these days are gone now, right? Because now with Harness, using complex deployment strategies like Canary, if I'm using Kubernetes, for example, I can just deploy this version to just one pod or maybe 2 pods and define different metrics that you can get from your observability tools, like let's call it like Datadog or AppDynamics or New Relic, you name it, right? define these performance metrics, and Harness, what it does is to use a machine learning model to, to build a baseline and then create a correlation in between your current deployment. We know about the previous executions, and if we find a divergence, we can automatically roll back that for you. And naturally, as an engineer, when I have this item in my backlog in Jira on Monday morning, I want to know what happened. Just don't give me the problem. Just give me what happened, right? So naturally, I will look at the logs. So what happens is, usually organizations, they bring the smartest and brightest engineers into a war room just to see in one single screen what's going on with my deployment, right? In some of these deployments, they might have known vulnerabilities. If you, are a seasoned engineer, you know that this particular error, like maybe it can be a null pointer or something stupid like that, it always happens in my deployments. If you're a new engineer, you want to understand what vulnerability you have introduced in your new deployment. And that's when Harness helps you find that needle in the haystack and creates a Jira ticket for you. Who likes to document here as an engineer? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3 out of, maybe 25 here. Documentation is maybe not the favorite thing we like to do, so Harness can go ahead and do it for you as well.
Okay, so you mentioned metrics there,
yeah.
But I want to hear about metrics from a different scope, right? So yesterday, in fact, he was so keen on it, he called it metrics.
Okay.
A booking. He didn't want just metrics, he wanted metrics 3 times over. So as an engineer, how do I know that I'm building my service and meeting the standards of the company? But then if I kind of put my engineering manager's hat on, how do I see how we're performing overall? Can I get to things like DORA, or maybe see where the process is failing for developers overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, there are two ways I can see this, right? That one way is going back to an internal developer portal. We actually have the ability, or the platform engineer, the security engineer, and maybe your engineering manager has the ability to define maturity based on the service, based on the security standards, and based on your DevOps kind of practices. And then you can have a scorecard, and Harness actually allows you to gamify this. So what is it required for you as an engineer to reach 100% score when it comes to service maturity? Well, by having less than 1% error in production. And then you can see your overall metrics throughout the particular period of time. And this, to me, as an engineer, is actually encouraging, right? Because I want to understand what's the impact I'm having on the business as well. It's not only about writing code. If I'm writing a cool feature, I want to see what the impact is. Now, if I put on my engineering manager hat, what I want to understand is where are the bottlenecks, right? So using things like DORA metrics, it's very easy for me to understand, okay, so why it takes me 17 days to actually an item that is ready for development to be picked up by an engineer. So I can simply, drill down into this, go ahead to the right team, have a conversation, and go ahead and fix it.
Wow. I feel like I have all the things.
Do you?
Let's see. Do I have all the things?
Yeah, I think we do.
I think so. Why don't we switch back to the slide deck for a minute?
Okay.
So we talked about having a unified toolchain. We talked about shared workflow and shared pipelines. We've talked about freedom with guardrails. We've talked about security and compliance. And we've talked about metrics. OK, so how specifically does Harness kind of do this? We try and focus on 4 key areas. We want to accelerate that DevOps modernization because it really supports that developer experience. I actually spoke to an engineer earlier, just randomly on our stand, and one of the things that was super interesting, he said, "Oh, we've been using Harness for ages, but I've never seen it. Like I barely know it." And actually, in some ways, that's a good thing. I'm an engineer. I'm building my service. It's been built and deployed, and it's going through that process, and it's not a problem. That felt like a great endorsement to me. So, we also want to measure and improve. We want to secure it, and we want to optimize cloud costs. And we do that through a modular approach, and we do that in a way where, yesterday Booking were talking about their stack. They use some of us, but they also use, other products. We're very keen that we want to help out where it makes sense for us to help out and integrate with everybody else everywhere we can. And that is the way we do it. We take a very modular approach to that. So kind of wrapping up, again, unified toolchain. Essentially there is power in an integrated platform, and you saw as we went across it, went through that whole process. And then, freedom with guardrails, so, the flexibility of being able to create things within kind of, areas that make sense. So, I had a choice of languages, I had a choice of platform, I had a choice of database, right? But I also had a paved path to production that was repeatable. So essentially that easy to do the right thing, hard to do the wrong thing. Metrics, metrics, metrics. That is key, and you've seen how you can get metrics from the service I'm working on all the way through to the DORA metrics, which you can view, by the way, from a organizational level down to a team level, so you kind of get that whole thing. You can see how a division is performing versus an individual service team. And then finally, security compliance. It's super important to make sure that you're not shifting the work left, but you are shifting the info left, making sure that it's easy for the engineers to solve that in context, in the flow of their day-to-day work, not 2 weeks after they've done the feature and somebody's telling them that there's a problem. You want to know right at the time that they're doing it. And then, we didn't go into it lots, but you saw how the policy came up and said, hey, you're not allowed to not do this. That policy as code to ensure compliance is like really key. And codifying it makes it simple. We work with some of the largest financial institutions in the world, and they love the fact that they can codify their policies and their routes to production to make sure that their engineers are doing the right thing and making that path as easy as possible. Finally, I would call out, we have a DevOps Modernization Summit, virtual, happening free in a few weeks. You can scan the QR code and sign up. We have some great people speaking that, including John Willis, who was the author of the DevOps Handbook. So, please sign up to that. And one last call out, we have our Lego, which has been auctioned off in about 15 minutes. Auctioned, raffled off. If we have your scan, you have to be at the booth to win it. So please come over. Aside from that, come talk to us. Tell us where you're struggling, and we'll see if we can help you or not. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.